In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Well, good morning to Helia and to Miss Connie. Well, good evening, Miss Connie. I hope you're having a good day there. Today here, not such bad weather, really. Apparently it's going to get very warm. It's about 15 degrees Celsius at the moment, which is not all that warm, but should be up about another 10 degrees warmer later on today, and very humid, which always makes it seem much more warm and hot and sticky and unpleasant. That dry heat you get in some countries is very pleasant. Just like the dry cold is also quite pleasant. But in this country, it usually comes with dampness, which is why my mother used to say, everybody seems to suffer from arthritis here. Let's see how that can be true, but anyway, there we go. Good morning, Bev. Hope you're well. And good morning, Suzanne and HM, whoever that is. God can keep you all. I hope you also have a good day where you are too. There's some sort of symbol with HM. I can't really see what it is. It might be an angel or something. Now then, today we're going to be reading not about fine weather, but about stormy weather, unpleasant sea crossings and so on. Sea crossings that begin to go very wrong very quickly. So without any further ado, let's crack on and read all about it, as they used to shout out when I was much younger, living in London. Gosh, that was a long time ago. 1 year ago. There we are. So Acts chapter 27, verses 10 to 20. A shortish bit, enough to make any reasonable person, though, feel quite seasick. Let's read from verse 9, actually. Now, when much time had been spent and the sailing was now dangerous because the fast was already over, so we're now in October, Paul advised them, saying, "Men, I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but of our lives." And that's where we finished yesterday. So verse 11. Nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul. And because the harbour was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also, if by any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbour of Crete opening toward the southwest and northwest, and winter there. When the south wind blew softly, supposing they had obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, a tempestuous headwind arose called Evroclidon. So when the ship was caught and could not be held into the wind, we let her drive. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on Syrtis sands, they struck sail and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. On the third day we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we should be saved was finally given up. One of the interesting things about this is that a lot of the words we don't actually know what they mean, because they've been lost in modern Greek, and we don't know what the ancient Greek word really means as it meant back then. Good morning, Ben. So there's a certain amount of conjecture about small matters, actually. None of them are great. Exact words. Some of them are nautical words, Greek nautical words, and we have no clue really what they are. And guess, because sailing is much the same now as it was then, and the wind still bloweth in the same mannereth. But there we are. So we'll point out some of those as we come to them. So verse 11, nevertheless, the centurion, who generally speaking gets a very positive write-up from St. Luke, Julius, was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul. Well, I can understand how that might be. Paul is a tent maker, he's not a sailor, whereas the owner of the ship has a vested interest in the boat, and the helmsman is a man who will be an experienced sailor. So Paul, nevertheless, has issued a warning, but the warning is not taken a great deal of notice of. I think that in the place of Julius, I probably would have made the same decision. Paul on the one hand, the owner of the ship and the captain of the ship on the other hand. Well, I think I'd say, and what gives you right to speak? But in fact, as it turns out, Paul is the one who is right. And because the harbour was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also, if by any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbour of Crete, opening toward the southwest and northwest, and winter there. Right. So the majority wished to go on to Phoenix, also in Crete, and actually not far along the coast, not even a day's journey along the coast, 25 miles or so along the coast, maybe a little bit further. We're not absolutely certain whereabouts this place Phoenix is in Crete. There are a couple of places it could be. One is a place called Lutros, and the other one is called Phoenikas, which actually does sound like Phoenix, but Phoenikas, Lutros, either of them could be okay. Certainly both of them have got harbours that more or less fit the description given by St. Paul. Personally, I think I would go in for Phoenikas. That would be the one I would think, which is not very far along that southern coast. So, if they do that, that is good, and it means that they can spend the winter in safety. I think if I'd been a passenger, I might have decided to get off the boat at this point, both because the idea of drowning doesn't appeal to me terribly, and also that I get very seasick. So the idea of drowning and seasickness together, incidentally, why it is I won't go on a cruise. Seasickness, not so much the drowning, would have had me taking to the shore and putting my stick and my handkerchief on the end of it over my shoulder and walking the 25 miles or so to Phoenix. Anyway, horrible, what they call it, oily fly, horrible fly flying around. So there we are. 13. Both these cities, by the way, both these towns, look like ideal places to go on holiday now. They're fairly remote and very pretty by the looks of things. I've only looked at them, of course, on Google Earth. But they do look to be lovely places. I think Lutros has now got an oil refinery or something in the background, but the place itself and the beach looks to be a beauty. It might not be an oil refinery, it could be something else, some sort of factory. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they have obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. So they're beguiled by this south wind. It looks as if it's going to be a fine journey, and everybody is sort of eating their sandwiches and looking at the porpoises and all that sort of stuff and enjoying what it is they're going to be doing. That they are still quite frightened by the idea of a storm is obvious by the fact that they are coasting, they're going along the coast of Crete. They don't go out into deeper water. they carry along the shore. Saying to themselves, will be there by nightfall very easily. Seemed like a good idea at the time. As the guy, was it Magnificent Seven, who threw himself into a cactus and took several weeks to pull out all the thorns. When asked why he did it, he said, it seemed like a good idea at the time. It wasn't the Magnificent Seven, it was something like that. Blazing Saddles, maybe? Maybe it was Blazing Saddles. But not long after, verse 14, a tempestuous headwind arose called Evroklidon. Now, the storm here in Greek is typhoon. So very strong, tempestuous wind caught up with them, struck them. In the Greek it says struck them, not caught up in, really hit it. And the Evroklidon, Evroklidon is an interesting word because it's made up of both Latin and Greek. I remember a school teacher of mine saying that the reason why you could not trust a television was because it was a bastard word made up of Latin and Greek, whereas telephone was fine because it's entirely Greek. Oh dear. Funny enough, back then we all understood the joke. I don't think you would tell a group of 14-year-olds this now and for them all to laugh and think it funny. Anyway, he didn't over-explain it like I just have. Good morning to Simon. Thank God. Yes, Ben, I'm fine. Now, even today, because really the topography has not changed all that much in 2,000 years, the mountains of Crete do cause sudden gusts of wind. And because of where Crete is, it actually catches the wind in a particular way. And you do get magnificent winds going on there. If you are interested, then you might like to get onto YouTube and put in, as I did about an hour ago, the words stormy weather Crete. And you'll see for yourself that indeed there's some glorious storms that take place on Crete, not the sort of thing you'd want to be in if you were bobbing up and down in a smallish wooden ship. And verse 15. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. So they are helpless against the natural forces of this great tempest. They don't have any choice except to just let themselves run. Now, later on, we'll find that it says here, they struck the sail. Well, if you've got a tempestuous wind, the first thing you do is strike the sail. There's Ryan pretending he can speak some foreign language there. I don't know what that says either, but I'll have to look it up later on, Ryan. Ubusuku, Obuhele, Bawo. Interesting to see what it means. So try and copy it later on. Okay, so they'd have taken down the sail straight away because the last thing you want to happen is the sail to get ripped into pieces. So they'd have tied it up and tied the spar to the mast straight away, or even taken it right down. And then let the ship just be blown wherever the wind takes them. They'd have no choice. Helplessness against these natural forces. And then verses 16 through to 19, we get the idea of in a terrible state they are in. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. On the third day, we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Right. It's my native language. Is that how they speak in South Lincolnshire? So, various things. First of all, that island Clouder, nowadays it's called Chrissy, and it's a sort of deserted island. Nobody lives there. There is one harbour called St. Nicholas, a good name for it, as he is the ocean of seafarers. It's about 23 miles offshore, directly south of Crete. It is in deep water, but because of this, it gave some shelter to the wind itself, against the wind. And they make use of this shelter to do the various other things mentioned until verse 19. So the first thing is they bring in the ship's tender boat. So the ship would be like it is, and then they'd have a little skiff or a boat tied with a rope along the back, and it rather looks as if this is sunk. So they drag this up and drag it out and put it onto the boat itself, onto the ship itself, presumably hoping that it might act, if need be, as a sort of lifeboat. Although there are many people, and the likelihood of all of them being able to fit into a small boat is unlikely. Normally, it would have been used when setting anchors or tying up at the harbour, or just going inland for a bit to see where they were, or to collect water or food or other things like that. Okay, so that's the first thing they do. The next thing, they undergird the ship to split it, to prevent it from splitting up. Now, interestingly, again, we have a word here that we don't really know what it means. Use cables, it says. In the Greek, it says use helps. These helps are probably a nautical term, and we assume there's either ropes or chains that will be there in order to stiffen the hull of the ship, or at least to give it some protection against running against rocks or sand. Okay, undergirding it that way. Right the way through until Victorian times, similar things are used to undergird naval ships, particularly, well, all ships. And sails and tarpaulins and so on, to fill in any holes that might appear in the ship too. They do that fearing they should run aground on the Syrtis sands. Well, the Syrtis sands themselves were off the coast of Libya. So they think that they're heading in that direction. Or they also move, these sands do. So even with a good map, you would not be able to see exactly where you were. And given that there is a storm, the sand itself would move again. Back in Roman Greek times, these were known as a sailor's graveyard, because so many ships would hit against these and would then sink, drowning everybody on board. Okay? And then it also says they struck sail and so were driven. Now, it's very unlikely indeed that they would actually lower the mast and the sails at that point. Having been driven by the wind already, they'd likely take that up right the way to begin with. So a variant translation of the same thing is to say they lowered the sea anchor, which was also made out of a sail. So you had a cross pieces of wood or metal like this, and then in between the 4 points of that, they would put sailcloth, then drop this on a rope into the sea, and it would, as you imagine, this finger here is is the rope, and this is the sea anchor. It would drag behind the boat like this, slowing it down. So although they're being pushed along by the wind, they're being slowed down by the sea anchor. And this would mean that if they do hit anything, they're not going to hit it quite as hard. Okay? And they're hoping, obviously, to stay out at sea and then navigate their way back to where they wish to be. So that's all day one. Day one and day two. Where are we now? So day two, the next day, they lighten the ship. That's verse 18. Now, what they mean is they take all the cargo and they jettison it, to throw it overboard. You've heard of flotsam and jetsam. Flotsam just is floating around. Jetsam is stuff that's been actively thrown overboard to lighten the ship, so that it stands higher up in the water. I guess it'd probably taken in quite a lot of water by this time. So throwing the cargo overboard means that it's going to start floating a bit higher, in less risk of being swamped. And then the next day, day three, it says here, throw the ship's tackle overboard. Well, in the Greek it says the ship's gear. So this would be any sort of extraneous furniture floating around, anything they could, take whatever they can and throw it over, because they're continuing to go down, they're continuing to sink, and things are not getting any better. And now they're left absolutely at the mercy of the weather. And things are not helping them, because we then read in verse 20 something even worse. Now, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we should be saved was finally given up. So it's about 2 weeks they've been beaten around in this. So altogether 2 weeks they are thrashed around with this. Now, you might say, oh, it's been dark and miserable, neither stars nor sun. But that, of course, was extremely important back then, because during the day you navigated according to the sun. So the sun always conveniently comes up in the east and very conveniently sets in the west. So you know roughly which direction you are looking in. If you have the sun coming up in your east and it's on your right-hand side, then you're looking north. And if it's on your left-hand side, then you're looking south. And the opposite, of course, in the evening. So they could not navigate during the day. And then at night time, all of these sailors would have been experts at reading the stars and knowing which way they were round and in what direction they should then sail according to that star compass. And we all of us know the North Star stays more or less where it is. Therefore, you can navigate according to that star. But if there are thick clouds over the sun, and you can't see where it's coming up, and thick clouds over the stars, so you can't see where they are, you just simply bob around helplessly. Okay? And that's where we're going to leave them. Dark, cloudy, no navigation. They don't know where they're going. They have no idea where they're coming from or where they've been, and now they give up all hope. I suspect that Luke would also like us to think in terms of this as life without Christ. You know, seas and the sea in Jewish mind was always symbolic of the presence of demons and demonic action within the world. And St. Luke has written about that earlier on in his gospel. So here we have this terrible sea, terrible, without navigation. You cannot navigate according to God, without possibility, and now without hope. What can possibly, all natural hope has been given up. And this is where we leave them for the moment. And God willing, we shall join us again and see what we're going to find tomorrow. Okay? So, in the meantime, we'll spend some time praying. So, I'd like you to pray, first of all, for Alban and for Richard, both of whom are extremely ill, both of whom have cancers, and both of them need our prayers. Okay, so start off by praying for them. And then the other ones, let me just find the list here, we need to pray for. So Virginie, Peter, and Hector, for Nicoletta and Nicoletta, for Daniel, who continues to improve, for Hilary, who's finished her chemotherapy now, for Erin's Joseph, for Dino's Simon, for Carol, for Georgia, for Jane, and for Christina's daughter Elizabeth and her mother. So you should pray for all of them. That would be a very good thing if you could do that. And well, then hopefully we shall be able to meet again tomorrow. Okay? Okay, let's see if there's anything anybody has been saying. Ubusuku Obueli means don't worry, Bao brother. I don't know where it's from. I don't know where it could be from. It looks like a South African language. Probably, it's not Swahili. Probably something like, I don't know, something South African or Zimbabwean. Nick says, challenging mission on Crete. Yes, indeed. All Cretans are liars. And we also pray for Wendy as well. Let's pray for her. Thank you, Miss Connie. May God receive her. God bless you. Thank you for asking for her, our prayers. We'll carry on praying for her for the next few days. Okay. So Wendy up in the northern, where did you come from? What you said yesterday, somewhere in Scotland. Ryan, I can't remember. Inverness, so yeah, okay. Yeah, God bless her and keep her. Okie dokie. Inshallah, God willing, we shall meet again tomorrow, when we will see that indeed there is a shipwreck. But all is saved. Right, thank you for your prayers, and hopefully, let me see, I can't remember, I'm problems. End stream, it says here. Okay, good night to Miss Connie. Everybody else, God bless you and keep you all. Your prayers for me too. God bless you, David, as well.